What's up, everyone? This is the second game we're covering from the 2026 Candidates Tournament being held in Cyprus. I just did a recap of Prague versus Giri, and we have another exciting game in an all-American matchup between Fabi and Hikaru with white and Hikaru Nakamura with black. So these two have been long rivals for many years. Two of the senior most members in the active chess scene today. Nakamura, I think, is 38. Caruana, also in his 30s. And let's kick off with the game between them. So Nakamura has actually had a pretty good record against Fabi, especially in the last 5 or 6 years. I think he's only lost once to him in Classical with about 7 victories, including some with the black pieces. So let's see what happens in this game. So Fabi starts with knight f3. And Fabi doesn't usually play knight f3. I think Hikaru was probably expecting e4, which is what Fabi's played against him most of the time. Hikaru responds with d5, and then Fabi plays c4, going into the main line ready. Hikaru plays e6, g3, so Fabi going for the bishop fianchetto. Now Hikaru makes the interesting decision to play d4. This is definitely a known move, but it invites an imbalance in the position where black has this deep fork pawn that's very extended, could become vulnerable later. Right now it's defended by the queen, only attacked by white's knight, but it does create a lot of asymmetry and a lot of really fighting chess. So bishop g2, knight c6, white castles, bishop c5, here e3. So this is a common theme to attack the advanced pawn. If black decides to play d takes e3, then we have actually f takes e3 is the main move here. This reinforces the center. So Fabi would plan to play d4 later. This would be a very good position for him. Okay, so after e3, Hikaru plays knight ge7. Now Fabi plays knight takes d4. I think this is a move that surprised Hikaru. It's not a very common move. I don't think he's ever played it before. I think even in top-level games, it's very rare. So what was Fabi thinking here? Well, there are some interesting continuations. The best move, or one of the best moves, is actually knight takes d4 and then playing b4, which happened in the game. But there are some other ideas here. For example, you could play e takes d4, then bishop takes d4, knight a3. This gives a pretty balanced position for both sides. But in the game, we have knight takes d4, b4 attacking the bishop, bishop takes b4, and then we have e pawn recapturing the knight on d4. Now, here you might say, okay, why can't black just take the d4 pawn? Well, this is something that could have been considered, but ultimately it doesn't work out tactically. You've got queen a4 check. Now the bishop on b4 is loose, so after knight c6, we have bishop takes c6, b takes c6, queen takes b4. It looks like black's winning an exchange here, but as you can see from the eval bar, this is actually a very dangerous position because white should actually be able to trap the black knight or the black queen here by playing knight c3. Queen doesn't have any escape squares. I think probably the next move would be something like bishop a3. Essentially, black queen has nowhere to go. It's out of the game and probably going to be lost for the rook. Okay, so back to the game. Hikaru castles, doesn't take the pawn on d4, queen b3, bishop a5, knight c3, then Hikaru plays knight f5. So we're still in a pretty balanced position. Both players have castled, have a couple pieces out. Fabi's got this strange pawn structure. He doesn't have the dark square bishop developed, but on the other hand, Hikaru doesn't really have his rooks in the game yet either, and his bishop is still sitting on c8. So bishop a3, attacking the rook. You don't have to move it. There's some other lines where you could actually give up the exchange there, but Hikaru does. And then Fabi strikes the d5, a very important move actually in this position. So Hikaru here decides to play knight d4, completely fine. Queen a4. Now the bishop on a5 is attacked. Hikaru plays b6, defending the bishop. Would have been a little better, actually, to capture the knight on c3, because after d takes c3, he's got knight e2 check, king h1, and then we have e takes d5, c takes d5, and then actually we have bishop f5 here, and the c3 pawn is backward, a little loose, could play c4, but ultimately black will be able to break up the pawn structure with c6, white will have an isolated pawn, and black's going to be completely fine. So going back to the game position, we have b6, rook e1, bishop d7 attacking the queen. Queen drops back to d1, and then we have c5. So this c5 break is Hikaru's attempt to sort of resolve the position. He's saying, you can actually capture me here. I'm giving up my rook. But in this position, winning the exchange is not great for white, because the light squares around the king are going to be very weak. You've got knight f3 coming in, bishop h3. Fabi will have actually a tough time to survive this position. So we have bishop b2, rook b8, getting out of the pin, and then a4. All right, and then after this, we have a6. So Hikaru's plan here is potentially to have a b5 break, maybe get a passed pawn on the queen side. If he can keep the c5 pawn, play b4, or exchange these pawns and have a passed b pawn, he'll have good chances to at least hold and maybe put some pressure on Fabi. All right, Fabi finally decides to resolve the tension in the center. D takes e6. We have bishop takes e6, attacking the c4 pawn. Fabi jumps the knight into d5 to block. Queen d6, bishop takes d4, c takes d4, and then rook e4, attacking the undefended pawn on d4. Okay, first we have an exchange on d5. Fabi exchanges a pair of rooks, recaptures. And here we're in a position where both sides have a rook, a queen, and opposite colored bishops. Now, if the rooks and queens are off the board, this position would be completely drawn. Level material, opposite colored bishops, just, shake hands and end your day. However, when there's queens and rooks on the board and there's opposite colored bishops, there can often be dynamic attacking chances, because if you look here, the f7 pawn can be attacked by the light squared bishop of white, the queen, potentially the rook. It can only be defended by the rook, the queen, and the king. So this black bishop, if white's targeting the light squares and black's towards black's king, it can't help with the defense. So there's a lot of maneuvering from this point on. I won't spend too much time on the specific moves. There were, it essentially was fairly balanced for a while. Hikaru made some inaccuracies. So queen f6, Fabi's bringing the king up. A lot of shuffling around. Hikaru offers the queen trade. Of course, Fabi declines. If he accepted it, it would just be a draw. Bishop c5. Not the most precise move here, actually. Instead of bishop c5, best was to play pawn to g6. This would create some lift for the king. Could play king g7. This pin could eventually be troublesome at some point. You might want your king off the back rank. But we have bishop c5. And then Fabi advances the h-pawn, indicating that he's going to keep coming for Hikaru's king. So h6. Hikaru doesn't want to see h6 on the board later by Fabi. Rook over here. So Fabi's plan at the rook coming to the h file is actually to bring it up to h4 and then potentially over to f4, e4, or g4. So if it's on f4, it can hit the f7 pawn, which is the weakest part of black's position. So queen g5, again, Hikaru trying to exchange queens. Fabi drops back to d1. A lot of maneuvering around here. Won't stop at all these moves. We'll be here all day. A lot of maneuvering. And finally, Hikaru brings his king over to f8. More maneuvering. This position, Fabi's finally got his rook on f5. And Hikaru cannot play f6 because the pawn on f7 is pinned to his king. Okay, at this point, there's going to be a lot of inaccuracies by both sides. We're not going to spend too much time here because essentially this sort of position, Fabi can play pretty much forever and always have a technically winning position unless he exchanges queens or maybe rooks, in which case Hikaru would have a decent chance of holding. Really, though, all Fabi has to do is make sure the queens stay on the board, and he should be able to convert this eventually. So, more maneuvering, avoiding the queen exchange. Finally, Fabi launches the tactic, taking on f7 with the rook. So what's going to happen here is Hikaru recaptures. Then it looks like Hikaru is losing the queen, but actually he interposes the rook on e6. So we end up with this exchange. Now Black's kingside position is really open. So rooks are gone, but really the white squares around Hikaru's king are fatally weak, and eventually Fabi should be able to make a breakthrough. So more maneuvering, a lot of queen shuffling around, avoiding trades, offering trades. Finally, Hikaru or Fabi gets the queen around to the king side behind the king. This is dangerous for Hikaru. He plays king d6. Here Fabi plays bishop e4. Should have played bishop f3, but still it's good for Fabi. Go back. Again, some shuffling around, some checks. Fabi, maybe trying to, I would say, build some time. I think it's 30-second increment at this point after move 40. Finally, he decides that the way to get through this position is he's got 3 pawns on the king side. Hikaru only has 2, so he's just going to push those pawns, come for the black king, which is exposed, potentially create a passed pawn, try to promote and win the game. So, more shuffling, more queen trade offers. Again, here Fabi decides to finally go for the queen trade. He recognizes that after d takes e4, he's got 4 pawns here on the king side. Hikaru only has 2. So even though it's opposite colored bishops and only 1 pawn advantage, Hikaru's pawn here in d4 is weak. It's never going to be a threat, whereas Fabi can just push his kingside pawns, eventually have 2 connected pawns, pass pawns, and he should be able to win the game. So this is smooth conversion from Fabi. Just move the pawns up, bring the king in position. For Fabi, this is straightforward. And eventually forces the king to a very passive position, starts going for the queenside pawns, push the c-pawn, and at this position, Hikaru Nakamura resigned the game. So Fabi starts the Candidates Tournament off with a great win against his longtime rival, Hikaru Nakamura. Hikaru drops a difficult game with Black. I think Fabi's choice of the ready there, especially with the variations he played, e3 and knight takes d4, took Hikaru by surprise. He used a lot of time there. Hikaru was still fine, but ultimately, just like in the Prague game against, the Prague game against Giri, White played an opening they don't play often, created winning chances, and ultimately converted. So congratulations to Fabi. He's looking in great shape. I won't spoil the other results in case you are still looking for some recaps, but hope you've enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow's action.